One, go. All right.
Welcome, champions, to another.
I don't know. It's you're not clear. What happened? Do you hear that, Izzy?
Like a rattling?
Welcome, champions, to another episode of the Perspective Podcast.
My name's Dylan Elias.
I am 𝐏𝐞𝐫𝐬𝐩.
And I'm Izzy Castillo.
And this is where we tune the heart of mentoring. Let's go! How's everybody feeling? Check-in time. How's everybody feeling today?
Izzy, you go.
I'm feeling good. I had a good slow morning, and I love those mornings where you can take time to have a coffee and take time to just eat and relax. And I was really excited to come on here today, actually. Not like every other day I do, but today I'm feeling like
I'm like, what do you mean today? This is the first day or something?
I'm feeling like today is going to be something good. But hello. Nice to see you guys.
I'm happy to hear that. My morning was exactly what I needed. I got a good routine now. Like me and Izzy were kind of talking about earlier. Got a good routine with the wake up, make my bed, make breakfast, get a little meditation, do a little reading, write some notes, and then just like sets my mood for the day. It all starts with the morning, man. It all starts with a routine, yeah.
That's facts. Routines are everything, man. Before we even get into what we're going to say, I got to give two shout outs. First of all, shout out to everybody repping GH, aka Ghana. Today is our Independence Day. We're 64 years old. So shout out to everybody Ghanaian Independence Day. Let's go. Mm-hmm. And the second thing, on Monday is International Women's Day. So I just want to give a shout out to Izzy and all the females in our lives, all the females in the world, just to let you know that we're rocking with you. We support you. We appreciate you. And yeah, you're highly appreciated, and just keep doing big things. And every woman in this world, we're giving you your flowers right now, So happy International Women's Day.
Let's go. Shout out to the ladies.
The ladies, there is no us. Let's go.
Big facts.
Yeah.
Literally.
Facts. All right. Yeah. So hey, let's get it, man. Let's what we got going on, Dylan?
I got a couple. You ready?
A couple
you ready
questions.
You ready to get into it?
I'm ready. Are you ready? Izzy, are you ready? Are we gonna
Oh yeah, don't worry. I'll be doing that drum roll for 2 minutes straight.
Yo, I was dying watching that. I'm like, cause your face started off so serious, and she was like, brrr, like like drumline, like
yeah, I was bringing that drum.
And then as it kept going, you saw her like starting to get excited about it, and then the drum roll was over, and she's just like full out like Travis Barker, like, and then Kwame's like listening to the question. She's like finishing off on the cymbals. I'm like, what the heck is juice?
Yeah, you're gonna have to clip that into this part.
Yo, I watched it like 10 times. Oh man. Okay. So okay, I got questions. All right.
Ready?
Ready? Izzy, did you warm up your shoulders? Like,
yeah, let's wind up. Let's go.
All right, drum roll.
Drum roll, hit it. Okay. How do you get a kid to care about school who doesn't seem like he cares about school? Isn't that the $1 million question of every parent and teacher?
Okay.
How do you get a kid to care about school if he doesn't care about school?
I think what you got to look at is what does not care about school mean? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. A lot of the individuals I deal with, a lot of the youth I deal with, if your basic needs are not being met, school comes next. You know, if you can't picture a life tomorrow, if you can't picture a life next year, if you're in that kind of place where those things aren't part of your everyday thinking, if you don't have goals, if you're in an environment where that's not something that's put in your brain, like how are you going to care about something like school? And you really need to figure out what's going on in that child's life to be able to figure out what they do and do not care about. You know, if they can't sleep at night because there's partying going on in the household, if they don't have a stable adult in the household, if they don't have food in the morning, if they don't have clothes or a washing machine, like how are you expecting them to think about trigonometry? You know what I'm saying? Like, so
lasting in their minds.
big facts. And yeah, I guess Kwame, maybe you can talk about it more from like working in the school system.
Yeah.
Aria, this is not the but I
she always has impeccable timing, eh?
Right? To the basement.
I will so yeah, I feel like that's a very broad question, because like what Dylan just said, like there could be so many reasons, you know. I'll give you a case in point. I remember in my first or second year teaching, there was a kid in my class who was barely at school. He was like barely at school. And when he was kind of like, you know, into it a bit, but like didn't seem like all there. You could tell there's something going on with him. And he'll be gone again for like a whole week and a bit. And some teachers were kind of writing him off. And then and it was early in my career, so I was kind of like getting a little bit annoyed with him. But one day I decided to call his house, to call home and talk to the mother. So I talked to the mom. I told her what's going on, and then she paused, and I was like, okay. And she's like, I didn't want to tell anybody this. I kind of wanted just to keep this within the family, but he's been doing this because he's been trying to spend more time with me. I was like, oh. And she was just like, yeah, we found out that I have cancer, and we're not sure how much time I have to live. So he's just been like focused on that. He's been home a lot, just hanging out with me, and we're just, you know, making sure we take advantage of all the time we have together. And I was like, holy shoot. So like I paused, like I didn't even know what to say. What I ended up doing was just talking to her. I ended up praying for her. We had a great conversation. But after that, my perception of the way he was totally different. I totally understood. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that you have to figure out why the kid is disengaged, why the kid doesn't really care about school. Maybe the kid cares about school, but that's exactly what Dylan said. It's the last thing on his mind. Another thing is that maybe the education system has failed the child. Maybe the whole time this person has been in the education system, people have been teaching him in the wrong way. Because I learned about differentiated learning. Differentiated learning is like understanding there's so many different learning styles, right? For instance, some people learn visually, some people learn sonotically, right? So you got to figure out, and some people learn through experiential learning. Some people need to learn by doing things. They can't just sit down and listen to a teacher talk and write notes in a lecture. That's too much for their brain. So the system fails them. Like they just get overloaded and they're like, F it. Like, why am I trying? You know? And for me personally, that was my case in high school. In high school, like I really struggled until a teacher actually invested time in me and figured out my learning style, which started to give me confidence once I started getting good grades. But prior to that, when I was getting bad grades, it was partly also because I wasn't trying also, but I wasn't trying because the system was failing me. So once I started getting confidence, then I started trying a little bit harder and I started caring about school, right? And I'll say another thing. So I think I'm rambling too long right now, but
let her rip.
Another thing. So right now, like I said, I run a program in an institution, right? I teach at an institution, and there's a lot of people at the institution I'm at that do not have high school diplomas. There's a lot of people at this institution that I'm at that are grown men that don't even have their elementary school. They didn't graduate from elementary school. There's so many. And initially the way we were delivering education was just through the traditional means of education, giving them work to fill out and all this stuff and long readings. And my boss, who I'm a huge fan of, kept saying, like, the education system has failed these people, but yet we're still giving them the stuff that has failed them, the stuff that they're not interested in. So we started coming up with adaptive ways to educate these guys. I found ways to get them involved. And my personal ways is just building relationships. You know, I do a lot of fitness stuff to reel them in, and then we start talking about education, and then we include it into the curriculum. You know, I kind of pretty much started making up my own curriculum, but it's been effective because then they started caring, and then they realized, you know what, maybe I can graduate from high school. I got guys that are hitting me up, like, just want to do extra courses just so that they can have the high school diploma and show it to their parents and say, hey, I didn't waste my time being here, right? So what I'm trying to say is that there's so many different ways, there's so many different reasons. And this is like the common answer to everything we've been saying. There's not just one way. Like, our podcast is about having different perspectives. Our lives are about having different perspectives from different reasons. So at the end of the day, nobody's the same in this world. And you got to figure out why the kid is not interested. There is not just one way. There's figure out the way, and then from there you could piece it together and give them
Preach.
Sorry for rambling, but that was a little bit that one hit home for me.
That hit home for me because I was a kid, and I remember I had a lot of life stressors when I was growing up, from elementary all the way through high school. Taking care of my family was my main priority. That was something that I had to do as the eldest, helping my family. My mom was working a lot. So I often had to like skip school to care for my siblings because we couldn't afford a babysitter. So to me, when I had that one teacher, like, take the time to help me with my studies and even tell me that I was worthy and capable of going to post-secondary, because to me, I didn't even see that possibility because I only saw it as caring for my family as my priority. So I think looking at, like Kwame, like you're mentioning about, like, looking at what are the barriers for them, you know, but looking at also what is of value for them at this time, because if their family is their time, then as educators, as supporters out there, you can look to see what you can do to lower the barriers when they come to school, because they might be like, I remember going to school not having food half the time. So if you're not eating, you don't have no energy and you're not getting proper sleep. So like, these are the things that, like, we see schools that are implementing breakfast programs, which is important because not everyone can go to school with food. So we're looking at like the basic necessities. Does this child have those necessities at school? And we got to look at the school as a place of providing that too. Because, you know, if a kid comes to school and they're like, I don't care about school, it's not because they don't care about school. It's because they don't see themselves like being able to be successful there right now.
Yeah.
So they only see being successful as caring for their family because that's the immediate need and urgency at the time. If it's so I think looking at what is important to them and what is a priority at the moment, and seeing if we can help them and support them and provide something that they don't have to worry about on a day-to-day basis. So looking at the full circle. And I think that's a good point too, of reaching out to the families. I know when the teacher that I'm talking about, that's a huge mentor to me, reached out to my mom and was like, hey, like, you know, we're noticing these things and that kind of stuff of more of concern. And that was already a bridge between those two supporters in my own life. So that helped me to be a little more further in my studies and my well-being at the time, because I had like a full circle support. So it wasn't like, oh, what is the family doing? Are they even caring about this child's school? The educator was talking to my mom and being like, hey, we noticed that Izzy's, you know, not coming to school with food, or these different things, you know, is there something, can we help you guys in some manner? So I've had lived experience from that. And it wasn't that I didn't care about school. It was that I just didn't have the means to be able to even see that as a priority, something that I should be even focusing on, because my priority was caring for my family. So I think, you know, looking at those things are very important. And yeah, everyone cares about something. So even if they care about family at the time, they care about their sports at the time, they care about maybe their mental health is the thing that they need, and that's the thing they're caring about. tackle that, and everything else can kind of build from there. But school is not the end all for anything. Dylan, remember those times going to classes, bringing the kid out for mentoring sessions, and then some teachers would be like, "Oh, we can't do it. They have this lesson's way more important." And then we would look at that and be like, their mental state isn't even in a place to take in that information at this time. So is school and this lesson right now as important as maybe a mentoring time to check in with the person and see what we can do to build skills for them to be able to be sitting in a class and take in that information? So it's always looking at like the mental well-being. I think people don't look at as often. They just see it as academic success. Is it there or not? But we're not looking at like, how are they coming to school? Did they get 2 hours of sleep the night before because they had some family stress happening and then have to come to school, perform 100%? It's not capable. So yeah, looking at it as a full circle support, I think that's something to consider.
Yeah, like you just 100% nailed it. And I think that hit home to me more because as you guys know, I grew up with ADHD and didn't get diagnosed till like in my adult life. But I think I was 26 when I got diagnosed. So after I got diagnosed, looking back on my relationship with school, things made a lot more sense. And you start to realize, what you do to get through that, and the behavior patterns that you adopt to be able to survive in those kind of systems that weren't set up for you. And I think we're doing a really good job in the last 10 years, I would say, with, Bell Let's Talk and identifying different depression, anxiety, and being able to have an open conversation about all this. But I really think ADHD, I call ADHD the Rodney Dangerfield of mental health. It gets no respect because I still think people don't take it seriously. And I still hear people saying like, "Oh, I have ADHD," or "I have," when they, just because they forgot something. And it's not the same as actually living with it. It's not the same as it affecting you day to day, which is something that I've learned to manage as best I can. But I really see it as like kind of like a superpower now. But for a long time, it was a struggle. And I really think people do not understand what it's like growing up in the school system with that. How I explain it to people is like, because you're sitting in class and you look around. I'm smart enough to understand that I don't understand. Like everybody's getting something that I don't. And like, why I can't? So you try to blend in. So you try to do all these different things. And that's why people become the class clown. That's why people become the jokesters. And this is why I was so drawn to athletics. It was something where I felt like I was good at. I felt like people respected me for doing something because I didn't feel like that in the classroom. It's funny. I actually just recently had a conversation with my mom, and she even said this to me like now. This was like a couple of weeks ago. She was like, "Oh, well, you never really cared about school." And I was like, man, it's not that I didn't care about school. It was that I was frustrated and I didn't understand. So yes, part of it eventually, like Kwame said, like part of it eventually becomes you not trying, but that comes from a place of frustration, not understanding why you don't understand, constantly failing over and over again. So you start to put up these walls and you start to, create these own narratives or stories in your head about what's going on. So I say it's like everyone in class is sitting behind a piano and you're sitting behind a piano, but you can't see everyone else, and they have fingers and you don't have fingers, you don't have hands, and everyone else is playing and you're trying to play, but you don't have fingers, but you can't see what's going on behind their piano. So you don't understand why they can make these sounds and you can't do it. And that's always how I felt in class. And I remember even like university, a bunch of my friends were joining microeconomics, and I was like, okay, cool, I could do this class. I need one of these courses. So I joined it. And the first day I was like, okay, this is way over my head. Like, I don't get it. And I was in a class with a bunch of first years, and I was in my second year, and we left and everyone was like, man, that was like tough. Like that was a hard class. And I was like, yeah, me too, man. Like, I don't really get it. And they're like, no, I didn't understand anything. Then we went to the library and we sat down, and then they started talking. They were like, well, I didn't really understand when he said this, this, this. And he's like, yeah, but I think he meant this, this, this. And then I realized, okay, they didn't understand, but they actually still understood. I actually didn't understand at all. I dropped the class the next day because I was embarrassed. I didn't want to tell you these first year guys, like, I don't get it, you know? So I just made up some excuse and I was like, oh yeah, I got to take another class, whatever. But, you know, you do that for so long and it kind of like, it drains your confidence in who you are. And that took me a long time to build up and really understand like about myself and that I wasn't stupid, you know, that I just had a different way of learning, like Kwame said. But when you don't have someone to kind of find that learning style and put it in you. But this, again, it's not a sob story because this is what I attribute to me being able to hustle. Like that's how I adapted those skills, was because, you know, I had to fit in socially. I had to pass my classes. So I had to find another way on my own. My creative process, like I attribute that a lot to my brain. And so sometimes it's hard to reel back in, but you know what I mean? Like a lot of the time it works for me and it works for me well. My hyper focus, like editing these podcasts, like how can I sit down and do 9 hours straight and not move, not eat? It's just what I can dial in. Like, so it is a superpower, but you know, like with great power comes great responsibility. So if I don't manage that, then it definitely like affects my life. But yeah, so that's I think that's a really good point both of you guys brought up. And I hope more people recognize that, because that was a lot of the kids that I would see. Like Izzy said, I knew this kid was dealing with this. Maybe he was undiagnosed, but when you go to the teacher and say, hey, he needs this time, and they say, no, we got a test coming up and he has to stay for this lesson. And it's like, you don't get it. He's not hearing what you're saying. He's gone right now. Like, look at him, look at his eyes. Like he's not here. He needs this 20 minutes, you know?
Definitely.
Looking at it from like a strength base too, I always love focusing on that, because I know when I started recognizing and dialing into my strengths, I was able to like conquer a lot more stuff, especially with school, because I wasn't like the best at it. I knew I was like a visual learner, and I learned that just from realizing like colors. I would remember a lot of things a little bit easier. But yeah, just like looking at anybody and looking at what their strengths are, and then working from there. If they are struggling with math, and all math it usually is like knowing how to do things like an analytical thinking way, but you can dial into their creative side of the brain and try to tackle those lessons from that creative space. And I know a lot of time people are saying like, there's not a lot of time to do these. We don't have the capacity to do this in the school, but there's a lot of supporters out there, and connect with them. And I know we were in the schools as mentors. We were able to have those conversations with mentees and be able to tackle some of those things in our sessions. So know that there's always support around, and that you don't have to tackle it alone. But knowing that, looking at a strength-based perspective on that, working with anyone, even yourself, like you can tackle a lot more challenges if you just dial it into your strengths.
And as Dylan was talking, I started thinking about even myself in my grade 9 year. I failed like every class except for phys ed and drama. And then in grade 10, I was put in a lot of, they streamed me into the lower level of every class. And I just remember just feeling embarrassed and ashamed. And like what Dylan just said, he was embarrassed of not understanding what the teacher was saying, what the lecture was about. And one of the lowest like frequencies in human nature is that of shame, right? Shame is like so low. It's very hard to move up from shame. Like you just feel like you're nobody. You feel like you're inferior to everybody. You feel like everybody is above you. And how can you move forward if you don't feel like you're somebody? So what I mean essentially trying to say is that like for somebody to overcome that takes a lot. So teachers out there, if you see kids that are struggling or quote unquote pretend like quote unquote aren't interested in school, sometimes it's because they're putting up a shell, just like whatever you just said. Sometimes because they're putting up a shell because they're embarrassed and they're ashamed of what's going on with them. They feel like they cannot progress. They feel like they can't succeed in the system. So then they act out, become the class clown, like Dylan said, or just don't go to school like me, right? So tap in and figure out what the reason is behind that. Because I'm saying this because this is a serious thing right here. When I look back, I think about it, man, had that teacher not invested time in me, I wouldn't be here talking to you guys. I would have just succumbed to my circumstances, just become the stereotype, get involved with whatever, might not even be alive right now because school wasn't a safe place for me. I didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't feel like I was somebody. I didn't feel like I had a chance to succeed in life. So the kid that doesn't care about school, no, he just feels that school doesn't care about him. So tap in.
I like that.
I like
that. That reminded me, that brought me back. Yesterday, I actually got to meet with a youth in person, and we were going to drop off resumes. And they're actually from Mexico. They're not, they moved here just 5 years ago. So I was in a zone of connecting with this youth and realizing that they weren't so confident to speak because they were a little ashamed about the language barrier there. So not being able to communicate as well. When we were going to drop out resumes and stuff, what to say, is it said properly? And I remember growing up and actually Spanish was my first language. It wasn't my, so English was second, and going to school and not being able to pronounce things properly, not understanding English language, and having to go into English classes and being all these classes that were like ESL for me. And I remember feeling so shameful because I couldn't communicate my needs or like anything. So I was pretty shy and silent for a lot of my growing up. And now I'm in a place where I'm being vocal and vocalizing a lot more and stepping into my own power and realizing how, like, talking to this youth yesterday and being able to share that experience of knowing that we were both like really timid people because we were afraid to speak up because we thought that no one can understand us. And it was this coming around and realizing like, oh, okay, like this is a moment that I can kind of bring something knowledge to this youth and be like, don't be afraid to shine bright and like speak and just practice, because you're your biggest barrier at times to be out there. And I know language is a big one for a lot of people. And that still is for me. Dylan knows how I can't pronounce certain words, but I
have the same problem. I'm not gonna lie. Dylan knows that too.
Yeah, I was like, yep, that's a word. That's a word. But yeah, it was really like, yesterday was a really cool day, just realizing how till this day, there's a lot of youth and children who are still, different experiences they have, and shame does, and like having your own judgment on yourself, it really holds you back from like stepping into opportunities. And yeah, it was kind of like a mirror was kind of reflected to me yesterday when I was spending quite a couple hours with this youth and realized, okay, this is a good reminder how far I came to, and also knowing that I was able to give something back, of being like, this is your strength. Like, you are bilingual. Like, you're like, that is going to be like your biggest strength. So don't see it as something that's like not, you're not able to be successful because you feel that you can't speak properly. But yeah, it was kind of this really cool come around.
That's cool. With the I always like to bring it back to practicality, since the part about our job that was very interesting in this sense was, for me and Izzy, we got to work at a lot of different schools over the course of our career. So within like a week, I could be working at, you know 10 or 12 different schools, public school, Catholic school, didn't matter. So I'm not here to bash anyone, but I am here to say some schools just figured it out. That whole phrase of takes a village. Some schools really put that into practice, and I urge people, if you see some of these like things that we're talking about, I'm just gonna give a shout out to, because there was a lot of schools who did it well, and I'm not gonna go through and name everyone, but 𝐏𝐞𝐫𝐬𝐩𝐞𝐫𝐬𝐻, they really took the time to make sure that every person in the staff had an understanding of what was going on with like a certain kid, like from the principal down, like from the principal to the people at the front office, like the secretaries, to the librarians, to the EAs, to the teachers, like not just the kid that the class was in. It was like everybody was kind of dialed in to the specific issues of every kid. And I really saw like magic happen in that school in terms of this, with like everybody working together to get the kid through the tough times and provide him with whatever, whether it was like going in early to make breakfast or pulling some clothes from the lost and found, putting together a little outfit, communicating with the parents. It was really powerful to see everybody kind of come together to work. So like I said, there was a lot of schools who did it well, but you can, and this goes back to what we were talking about last episode about building a culture. And that, I don't know where it came from, because when I went in, it was already put into practice. So I can only assume it was the principal.
Leadership, man.
Facts from the
I
top
think starts
down.
from there. Yeah.
Trickles
Attitude
down.
reflects leadership. Simple as that.
Straight up. So maybe I'll send this episode to them.
Shout out to 𝐏𝐞𝐫𝐬𝐞𝐫. Let's go.
Yeah, man. But yeah, so you could do that in your school. Even if you're not at the top, like you can start building that culture, So think about that. It has been done. I've seen it, and I don't think the people who don't do it necessarily do it on purpose. It's just, every school is a little different, but it can be done. I've seen it.
I like that fact too of just, every day is a new day. And often when I remember a lot of mentees we would get would be already shadowed as someone who, is just hard to deal with. We don't want them in the class 24/7. We want, sometimes we pick them up and be like, yeah, take them. So looking at youth and children and youth and as like a blank slate every day, because sometimes you'll get fixated on someone who, you're just like, oh, they do this all the time. And so after that, dialogue and always thinking that about that person, it's hard to have people supporting them. And when we look at these schools and different environments, often that's the common mentality that, they're just frustrated and burnt out with the child's behavior. But then they forget of all these milestones and strengths that even if they showed up to school, that is a success. They got out of bed and left whatever scenario they were in to come to school, probably not able to learn, but still was coming to school, which is the biggest step. So I think we need to celebrate a lot more of milestones with individuals and see their strengths and not always judge them on their behavior that's the write-off for the rest of the year for them. And when you look at the schools that are supporting it as a full circle, they're looking at that youth and looking at them every day and seeing what they were able to accomplish, seeing what they were struggling with that day, checking in with them and know a lot of things about them. And then you go to different environments and schools that don't know anything about the kid. They're like, oh yeah, they showed up today. But then at the end of the report card day, it's like, oh, they've been misbehaving in class. There was all these negative things and never one highlight. And I think that's with the mentoring, we were able to do that. And I think that's why a lot of the children and youth really connected with us, because we got to see them in a different light. And every time we would bring those things up, oh, they built this today, or they did this artwork, the teachers would be like, what? They did that? They were so shocked. But that's because they're missing that strength and looking at the child as a blank new slate every day. And I think that's the art that we need to start looking at in the work.
Facts. Yeah. So essentially, celebrate, but most importantly, recognize the small achievements. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So I don't know how y'all feel. I feel really good about that episode. I think that's something that's going to definitely come up again at some point or another.
Yeah.
But yeah, on that note, hey, Dylan, hit them with the outro.
All right, everybody. Well, that's this week's episode. Just remember what? What? All right, everybody. I was so passionate about what I was saying, I forgot.
We're going to celebrate you, Dylan. We know where you're going. We know where you're going with this.
All right, everybody. Well, that's this week's episode. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, there's not one way to mentor. This is just our perspective. See you next week.
so far.
Hold on. I'm running upstairs 2 seconds.